Moving right along, next we have the University of California presenting the cybersecurity strategies from a university perspective, and delivering that's going to be Dave Rusting. He's the CISO for the University of California, Office of the President, where he leads and collaborates on system-wide information security initiatives. He was previously CISO for the University of California, San Francisco, one of the leading health services universities in the nation. His experience covers multiple industry sectors, including financial, healthcare, higher education, energy and related public sectors, and through collaboration with the functional teams such as ethics and compliance, legal affairs, risk management, and privacy. He leverages a unique blend of creativity, business acumen, and technology expertise to promote a risk-based approach to cybersecurity. Everybody, Dave Rusting.
Thank you. Thank you, Russ. And even though I am at the University of California, sometimes run-on sentences do come into play, so thank you. And thank you, public sector partners, for inviting us today to talk about what we're doing at UC. And I was going to talk today about managing cyber risk at UC, because I know we focus sometimes on cybersecurity, but we've had some things happen in our environment where we've shifted our approach to be very cyber risk oriented. But before I start, I have one question for the audience, if I can see them through the lights. Any football fans in here? Show of hands. How many Raider fans are here? How many Niner fans? All right. Any Dallas Cowboy fans in here? Okay. So just want to tell you, when I was coming up here this morning, car in front of me, my anomaly detection went off in my IDS because there was a car driving around with those Cowboy flags, and Cowboys aren't playing tonight, and I didn't know there were a lot of Cowboys fans in Sacramento. So if you need a ride, the Buick's circling the block for you folks. But anyway, it's like anything else. You look for patterns and things that you don't expect to see in certain areas. So moving along into our environment, if I could hit the button properly. A little background on UC. Not everybody, sometimes you talk about the University of California, people assume they know about it, or they associate it with one of the larger campuses like Berkeley or LA. But at a glance, we are 10 campuses, 5 health systems, 3 national labs. We have over 250,000 students, over 1.7 living alumni. It touches every county and every part of California and all around the globe. It is a great, great institution that does research, education, and public service for the state of California and for the world. And as a result of that, we are stewarded with so much information and so much data to protect. It's really, really, sometimes can be overwhelming to figure out how do you do that in our environment, especially when you have issues like this that happen. Last summer, UCLA Health was attacked. We had a reportable event of 4.5 million patient records. I was on vacation when that happened. I was not on vacation after that. So the thing is, it was a shift point. We, as those 10 independent campuses and 5 health systems, something had to change. Each group was doing, people believed it. They wanted to protect the data. They wanted to do the right thing. They had things in place to protect their environments. However, we are a system, and we started to look at this as how do we address this as a system? And how do we protect the information in our institution when the very nature of what we do is to be open? We are an open environment. We thrive on collaboration and innovation. So how do you do that balance? Because we have the regulatory stuff we have to do, as well as the innovative things we need to do. So we ask ourselves the question, how do you manage the risks? This isn't just somebody didn't have a firewall configured or a detection piece. This is about business risk or mission risk. And so how do you manage it? We have common challenges across all our environments. And this is true, I think, in many of the states, California, Oregon. You can go to anywhere and ask them. we have an open environment, relatively open. An open meaning not open access to everything, but that's the way our environment works. It's like almost like a public library. We have distributed structure. We like to call it diffuse or diversified decision making. We are not a command and control environment, which makes the collaboration aspect so much more important. And we have a lot of sensitive and valuable data. We have HIPAA data, we have intellectual property, we have student records, we have financial data. All those things combined are things that we are entrusted to protect, and we got to figure out a way to do it. And there's a couple models, right? If you have you get a higher risk if you are less mature in your processes and your controls. You don't have to spend as much on it. But if you want that lower risk, there comes with a price of higher cost and higher maturity and understanding what you need to do. So we have to find the appropriate level and the balance. And this is a kind of question, like, how do we find that balance and still enable the mission? So, under leadership of our President Janet Napolitano, we came up with a plan to say, you know what, let's think of cyber risk in a different way and establish a program so that UC as a system can get its, what I would call, a better posture toward managing cyber risk. And so we have 5 core pillars, and these were actions that we take and continue to take to ensure that we're doing the right things. One is we updated our governance. So before, there's, every location had CIOs and CISOs and all that stuff, but we actually brought together an established committee where there's a cyber risk responsible executive at each location. And that is a cyber risk person, and they are not necessarily the CIO of that organization. They could be a provost, CFO, somebody with a business or an academic background, so they have actually the understanding and the reach across the institution to help enable managing the cyber risk. That group meets, we have met them quarterly. With them, they are getting educated as well as providing the input so that we're collaborating more effectively and looking at solutions that we can leverage as a system. We also have done what we call enhanced risk management. So, basic things like adopting the NIST CSF framework and things like that, but also involving groups outside of IT. Office of General Counsel, our legal affairs folks, risk management and insurance services, ethics and compliance and audit services, academic groups, faculty. All these groups have different perspectives and can help you understand and manage that risk. Because I can tell you, I've been in many conversations where people, many great IT practitioners, think they understand the interpretation of law or case law, but they don't. In the same time, I've been in meetings where the risk management folks in insurance services will say, well, what's the, to them, a small claim, they can live with that because that's within their cap or their allowance, so they're fine with it. But to a practitioner, you'd be horrified to have that loss. So it's about bringing them together and being able to manage that so that the institution as a system could understand what do we need to do to manage that risk and lower it. We also looked at adopting modern technology. And what that means is that while different locations had varied levels of solutions in place, the bad guys are fast, and we have a lot of smart people in our system, but they sometimes can move faster than even we can because sometimes people's day job isn't always to stop the bad guys, or the technology shifts so quickly they can't always detect those things. So we looked at trying to find common platforms across the systems that we could leverage, because one of the key things is you need to have visibility into your network and systems. And that seems like a kind of common thing to say, but it's a little tricky when you have a very highly distributed and highly independent organization that you're working with, and we just multiply that times 15 or 18, and the problem becomes very, very challenging. So we adopted some common modern technologies. We hardened up our security environments, just doing some basic things, saying, you know what, there was a comment yesterday, if somebody leaves their garage door open and they get robbed, no amount of locks are going to stop that unless you turn those locks on and do that, unless you patch those systems, unless you educate your user base, unless you go out and vet contracts properly with your vendors. It's one of these things where it's a, just the basic hygiene, they like to use that term, isn't being done. And so we focused on getting that accomplished. And then maybe one of the most important things is system-wide cultural change. We had to get people thinking This is something, it's a business or mission risk issue. We want to change the culture. Mandatory training for folks, not just optional, right? Our HIPAA training is, you're required to take it if you're in those environments, so that compliance was almost 100%. You make something voluntary, oh, it's not going to be as high. You make it mandatory, suddenly it goes up and the visibility goes up. So mandatory training. We also looked at having system-wide cyber summits. We actually pull all our security folks together and ancillary areas to educate them, to have discussions and conversations about this, which is very, very important, because what we don't do, since we're so distributed around the state, is get together enough to talk about these and interface with folks. So when I have a problem at Santa Barbara, I know who to go to at Merced, know who to go to at UCLA Health, and so forth. And that's a very, very key thing as part of our changing our culture. I keep hitting the laser pointer. I'm going to blind somebody in a second here. But one of the things we looked when we decided to do this program is say, okay, that's great, but there are some characteristics, and these are things we wanted our leadership to understand, and they do, and to communicate out that our view on this and managing this risk in this program is it needs to be principle driven. We have to have agreement and adhere to these principles and do them together. We have a lot of different competing priorities across our system, and different campuses and medical centers feel differently. We need to come together and drive on the principle, And the previous conversation was about the, move away from the blame and shame and focus on the health or public service kind of model. From our view, it's very similar. Let's be hard on the work and not on the people. The people are doing the best they can. You got to be hard on that work, because if you get people focused on solving the problem, it's a lot better than saying, well, it was that person's problem. Make them accountable. This gets down toward having the proper governance and proper responsibility lines established, and establishing the updated governance to help us do that. Has to be transparent. Sunlight is the best antiseptic. I know a lot of folks don't like their audits and other things, but we actually think that they're actually one of our greatest allies, because it's just like anything else. You have to check to make sure you're doing it the right way, and you have to move towards something that is clear and people understand. If it's transparent and people understand or see, they may disagree on the relative level of doing something, but they agree on the core thing you're trying to accomplish. And when you understand and communicate that clearly to somebody, it makes getting toward achieving a goal a lot easier. And we found that to be the case. And it has to be measurable. We have to have some baseline. If we don't know what we're trying to measure, or we're saying, well, we're doing good enough, or what is knowing the value of a metric, you have to have some sort of baseline. So establishing that baseline to say, okay, has everybody done a risk assessment in the past 12 months? How many critical systems have been patched in the last 30 days? What is the trend line on that? Those sorts of things are important to know, and measuring them allow you to track improvement over time. And so a couple key takeaways. We don't control the threat. We are not going to stop these attacks. They're coming from everywhere. But we do control our readiness. And I think with readiness comes a little fear and trepidation sometimes, because how do I get ready, right? Well, we can control our readiness by taking an approach and a framework that helps drive it and having your leadership behind it. That leadership helps build the sustainable program. That kind of balances the need to protect our stuff and our mission. I mean, we have very strong research, innovation, privacy constructs within our environment, and we have to balance those to ensure that UC and the people it serves get the most out of it. We need to improve our, a base core thing is our capability to protect, detect, and respond to these things. It's not about stopping all the breaches, it's about detecting them, responding to them quickly, and shortening that time window. No such thing as purpose protection. That sounds very like mom and apple pie sometimes, but they continue. The bad guys will always evolve, and we need to structure ourselves to think that way and behave that way. And one of the key messages we have is being consistent and coordinated is critical. That was the one message we said. We want to be consistent in our approach and coordinated. It doesn't mean we do everything the same way, but it's significant and consistent enough that we are able to track and measure it over time. So with that, I'm glad to talk with folks afterwards, and I appreciate your time, and thank you for the invitation.
All right. Thank you. David Rusting, the CISO from the University of California.